Spezza tracks it down in front. Matthews to Marner. Have to hurry. Tim scores! John Tavares overtime winner!
This is absolutely unbelievable by Austin Matthews. A complete turnaround. Take the cake to Mitch Marner.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another edition of From the Booth. John Bartlett alongside Greg Millen. Greg, when we think of a busy hockey season, we think maybe 82-game regular season schedule plus the playoffs. But when you think baseball, there's over 160 games. What do you think about doing both sports in the same year?
First of all, I don't know how anybody can cross over in sports. I always find that amazing when you play-by-play guys tend to do that and do it well. Probably the gentleman you're talking about may not have been married at the time, because I don't think he was ever home, but that is remarkable.
Well, that is who I'm talking about. Today's guest, a good friend of mine from the American Hockey League days, and now he's a radio broadcaster play-by-play for the Columbus Blue Jackets, Bob McElligott. And when Bob and I were in the American Hockey League together, when I was with the Toronto Marlies, he was with the Syracuse Crunch. We're in the same division, in the North Division, so we saw each other a lot. But Bob was doing the Crunch in the hockey season and the Syracuse Sky Chiefs in the baseball season, who, for Toronto fans, were the affiliate to the Blue Jays. So maybe a little familiarity there for Blue Jays fans who followed along. So he's got some great stories about his path to get there and, of course, working with one of the most entertaining coaches in the National Hockey League. So without further ado, please welcome today's guest on From the Booth from the Columbus Blue Jackets, Bobby Mack. Bob McElligott, I think you already win the award for Best Studio and Backdrop. So good for you with your fancy setup you've got there.
Well, I've been doing a lot of work from home already, so I've had to figure this out. I'm fortunate enough, I have a 16-year-old that does a lot of YouTube stuff, so he's already got the green screen, so I can look like I'm anywhere I want to, I guess.
That's cheating.
That's
unfair. My guys are all
it's taking advantage of what you have. That's all. That's the way I look at it. Take advantage of what you got.
Your resources. I like it.
Absolutely. Well, you know, we were just joking about it off air, so let's hit off with this. You know, in the American Hockey League, you and I, of course, are longtime friends from our AHL days when you were in Syracuse and I was in Toronto, but we used to have to do all our own teching and work like this kind of thing. So this is, I guess, old hat for you at this point.
Yeah, you really draw back on some old talents that you had that you'd hope that you could forget forever. But, hey, in times like this, you got to figure out what makes it work. But, hey, John, as long as we don't have to carry those big cases up the back steps of some old arena somewhere so we can set up our own radio gear, as long as that part is out of the equation, I'm okay with doing all this stuff.
Yeah, you mean like the stairs to get up to the old booth in the War Memorial?
Well, yeah. Well, see, I was fortunate. I could leave all my stuff up there. I only had to do it basically 2 times a year, beginning of the season, the end of the season, unlike you. But I remember the old steps, and I don't know if you ever worked at the old Hershey Park Arena, but, oh, that was ridiculous because I had this huge case. It stood about, 3 feet, 4 feet high. It was crazy. And there were these back steps. They were wide enough for one person to go up the steps. And it kind of wound around. And I guarantee you every time I started up those steps, somebody started coming down the other way. Every single time I went to that building, and we went there a lot. And then when you got to the top, you had to wheel it through the concourse. Then you had to walk up the steps to the upper concourse, and then you had to drag it through a row of seats just to get to the area that you sat because you were right in the middle of the crowd. So that, I hope, will be the all-time least favorite setup in my hockey history.
Well, you reminded me of a story. Sorry, John, I'll just quickly tell this because nobody will believe this. We were doing a game in New Jersey one night. It was Dean Brown and I for Ottawa. We're sitting in the middle of the stands back in the other building, and we were watching a little boy come down the stairs, and he didn't look very well at all. And that's when you even hung your microphone over the glass partition there to do your stand-up. So down he comes. He's in a bit of a hurry, and sure enough, he was sick. And I'm telling you, he was sick all over the microphones, all over Dean Brown's notes. That was needless to say, we didn't do a stand-up the rest of the night, and Dean didn't have any coffee either because there was some samples in his coffee. And that was one I will never forget about being in the stands and broadcasting. We don't have many buildings like that anymore, but that was unbelievable.
Well, I'm going to touch more on Syracuse in a sec here because I've got some photos to show that we'll talk about with Bob. But that reminds me of another story, and you'll remember, Bobby, this one. When we were in Cleveland at Quicken Loans Arena or whatever it's called now, something Mortgage Center. But anyways, we were the same way. We were in the stands, and it wasn't always busy in the early days especially. But I remember one time we were in the stands right beside the aisle, and this guy had a few too many on Dollar Beer Night, I think, in Cleveland. And he came downstairs, and he lost his balance a little, and he knocks my computer while I'm on the air, and I reach over and grab it, and it's dangling by the monitor, and I'm still talking but looking at him like, dude, what are you doing? And it's, sorry, and he's trying to yell. I'm like, just go sit down. Go sit down. You're not making it any better. But, okay, so Syracuse, though, the War Memorial, Millsy, you'll appreciate this. This is where Bobby spent a lot of his time, and Bobby had the nice sort of bang-on center ice perch. It dipped down a little lower. Now, the one
I can stand all the way up, Greg, is what he's saying.
Yes, he can stand all the way. First of all, it was a great view of the ice. I'm going to see if I can show you here. I thought I had this figured out how we're going to show you the one sec here. I've got here we go. Okay. See, we're working on our yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, there we go. So this was the view from the booth. So you had a great view of the ice for sure. But the funny part about this booth, it was known around the league for a place where often you would crack your head or rip your pants. So here's why. Here's a look from doing the playoffs one year with Bob McGill and I. So this was our setup. You could see how low the roof comes down behind you. You had these metal bars in front of you where you kind of had to look through them to be able to see what you're doing. And yes, that is electrical panels and cabling that dangled all behind you and on the floor of a metal floor as well. So it was always an adventure to be in Syracuse because you never knew what you were going to get from, where's that other one I had here? I think this is it here. And yeah, there you go. So that's sort of, yeah, you can see how so just past Bob is where it dipped down on the right. And that's where Bobby would be perched all the time. And you never hit your head much, but how many times, Bobby, did we have guys talk about they tore their pants or cracked their head off one of those beams? Or I know Derek Wills once, he still says he got a buzz of electricity when he touched the wire there once.
Yeah, I believe that. I believe that. Also, when Wilkes-Barre was there one day, there was a box just below that broadcast position, and it caught on fire before the game started. And Tom Grace was setting up all of his stuff there, and which made me laugh because, you know, Tom Grace was he was so particular about everything that he did, and all of a sudden he's got smoke rolling out of this electrical box down at his feet. He didn't know what to do. Neither did I, but it wasn't affecting me, so I wasn't that worried. But yeah, it was that roof was a barrel-shaped roof, right? So where we were in the press box, that's why it's so low, because it curves down, and there were those were concrete beams, for crying out loud. So when you walk through the press box, you had to walk like this. You had to walk this going
and carrying
in,
that big
and then you had to walk like this going the other way, right?
Yeah.
When you were leaving, and if you didn't, believe me, I worked there 10 years. It happened to me more than once. I'd start walking through there. Somebody behind me would say something. I'd look back over my shoulder and hit my head on the next beam, you know. Also with Derek Wills, I can't remember who was doing color with him for the Hamilton Bulldogs, but his partner actually cracked his head and busted himself open.
Yes, he did, yeah.
Yeah, he had to go down and get, butterfly bandage before the game from the trainers. He had blood on his shirt, and it's funny now. It wasn't funny then.
I know.
Yes. Yeah,
That was probably funny then too.
Al McNeil.
I mean, I mean, your suits, you didn't go much higher than a Walmart to get a suit that you were going to work there, or that you're going to wear to work there, because Johnny's right. You were going to rip the pants or catch the jacket, or so that's all true.
Let's shift gears a bit. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. One, I'm sure the fans would love to know about. He's great with us. How about Torts? How is that to deal with as a media guy in the home market?
Well, it's funny because when he first got hired, look, I had done this for a long time when he got hired, right? But it was John Tortorella coming, and I've told him this story, and he still rolls his eyes, but I did what everybody else would do. I went to YouTube and I watched all of the clips of John Tortorella lighting up Larry Brooks and everybody else in the media. And I looked at my wife and I said, how am I going to deal with this guy? Because in our pregame show, we have a one-on-one with the head coach, and we've had it for years. And all of a sudden, that coach is John Tortorella. And the first game that he coached was in Minnesota. And, Greg, I'm telling you, I literally, the night before, it took me longer to go to sleep because I was really thinking about what I was going to ask him the next day, how I was going to handle this thing. Because I talked to Kenny Albert. He was the guy that helped me the most because I knew that he had dealt with him with the Rangers. And I called him and I said, Kenny, what do I got to do with this guy? And he said, it's really simple. He said, it's really simple. He goes, number one, don't ever be anywhere you're not supposed to be. And you guys know what I mean. Torts is very protective of the area right outside the dressing room, especially in some of the buildings that we go to, like in Dallas, where they do their workouts right outside the room.
Yeah.
He doesn't want you anywhere near that. If you're the media, it doesn't matter if you're the team broadcast, to the end of the hall. So he said, don't be anywhere that you're not supposed to be. He goes, and if you ask good questions, you will get great answers. And that has been absolutely true, to be honest. And again, I didn't tell him until a long time later how nervous I was to do that first interview with him. But, John Tortorella, he started in the All-American Hockey League as a player and then as a coach, and that turned into the East Coast Hockey League. I was there in Johnstown. I worked the 10 years in Syracuse. We both climbed up through the minors, and Torts, he's the kind of guy that he has a respect for people that have, started at the ground floor and worked their way up. So that helped me out. Also, Jody Shelley played for him with the Rangers for a short time. And, Jody and I were together in Johnstown. We were together in Syracuse. So, just that credibility with Jody, he saw that at the beginning. But, I consider him a good friend. I sit down. I have great conversations with him. I get a lot of great stuff out of him, and it's just because he's a real person. And that's what I like about it. That's what I'll miss about him when he's gone, because, someday he will be. It's just a real conversation. He doesn't dress anything up. I've talked to other coaches where even if you ask them a question that you don't think is a difficult question, you can see in their face the thoughts running through their mind. Well, how do I answer this? What if the player hears it? What if my GM hears this? What? John Tortorella could care less about any of that. He's going to give you the honest answer. It's going to be a great answer, and I love him. And you know what? He's a Boston guy, so he will just go around and he will just give you crap all the time. And my approach with it has always been, if you don't give it back right away, then he's got you. And I've seen other people around that they tiptoe around him, and he knows it. And he just eats them alive. Whenever he feels like it, he'll just, do it. And and I'm not going to be one of those people. It's never been that way. I've been very fortunate, but I love working with John Tortorella. All the stories you hear about the people that have worked with him is what a good person he is and how caring he is about people. All those stories are absolutely true.
Great to hear, because I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, just before we got into this mess, John and I met outside in Ottawa, Senator locker room, in front of the locker room, actually. So I got away with that one. And we had a long talk about leadership and life. And, he is spectacular with us as well, and a real good person. I think that's the best way to describe him. And I can tell you that, you're around the team a lot more than I am, obviously, day to day. But I have a pretty good idea that players like playing for him. Many think that they don't. Sure, he's honest, sometimes too honest with players. But I think players, like all of us, just want to know the truth. They want to be told, good or bad, and John will do that. And I can tell you, most professional athletes, that's all you want. You don't want anybody tiptoeing around news that they may not want to give because they're afraid to.
Yeah, and you might not want it at a certain time, as you would know. But I think a great example of what you're talking about is Zach Werenski. Zach comes in here in his rookie year. He lights it up. He's terrific. The second year, he's playing with a shoulder injury. Torts didn't realize how bad that injury was. In fact, he's told the story many times. Seth Jones came to him at one point and he said, look, I'll take care of Zach. You just need to back off a little bit. So he recovers from the shoulder injury. He comes in his third year, and all of a sudden, Torts is on him about playing more defense. He wants him to be more defensively responsible. I know you can score from the blue line. You need to be more defensively responsible. And he was a bit of a mess for a lot of that year, trying to figure all that stuff out. And then you see him this year, he's a totally different guy. And I think in the second and third year, I think there may have been some times where he was struggling with the way John Tortorella coaches. But now here in year 4, he's kind of figured it out. Jody has told me as a player, you have to kind of get to the point with him. Not everybody, but some guys that he pushes in a certain way. You got to get to a point where you say, "The heck with him. I'm tired of this. I'm going to do, what I think." But actually, by the time you get to that point, you're doing not just what you think; it's what he's been trying to get you to do, right? So you got to get over that hump. You mentioned Ottawa. Anthony Duclair, one of the biggest fictional stories in the NHL is that John Tortorella does not like Anthony Duclair and vice versa. And that couldn't be any further from the truth because, here in Columbus, he talked about how much he liked him. Duclair came here because Vinny Lecavalier told him that you've got to play for this guy. He will teach you how to play the game the right way. And so all the times that Torts would say, I just don't think he knows any better. I don't think he knows how to play the game the right way. He didn't mean it despairingly. He meant that I need to help him and teach him. And I remember after he got traded, we went to Ottawa. We went back to Ottawa and we pulled in out in the loading dock. And Torts always is the last guy off the bus. And I'm usually the second to last guy off the bus. So I got off the bus and Anthony Duclair had just parked his car and he was walking up to the building. He was walking right alongside the bus. And when Torts got off the bus, they looked at each other, they shook hands, and they stood there and they talked for a couple of minutes. Usually I let Torts go in front of me so he can go through security with his bag first. But I stood there for a minute or so, and I was like, all right, this isn't ending anytime soon. I'm out of here. But, he really does care about people. And, I think you're exactly right. Players do need that. And there are points where they don't think they need it. Sometimes they think they know better. And, when we were in Tampa a couple of years ago, was that last year, the year before? We were there for a couple different things. One was the Stanley Cup celebration. One was Marty St. Louis' number retirement. But when the guys from the Stanley Cup team were back, they had all gone out for dinner the night before the game. And it was at that point where towards some of those players, let him know how much they appreciated what he did for them. And they didn't realize it at the time. So, yeah, Greg, sometimes it takes a long time for them to figure it out. Some guys know right away, and they're cool with it. Josh Anderson's like that because, Josh played in London, and he's used to the hunters telling him exactly this is how it's going to be. So he's okay with it. Some other guys, it takes a little longer.
Yeah.
You talk about the background that you and John Tortorella have because, of course, that's what happens when you go through the minor leagues. You get a bit of a different sense when you work your way up with players and coaches. For yourself, though, you've got a little bit of a mix in your trail that took you to the NHL. Maybe you could talk a bit about the road that brought you there and included doing some baseball as well, which is you had a little mix of sports there.
Well, yeah. My first job at Pro Sports was being the mascot for the Johnstown Chiefs in the East Coast Hockey League. That was it.
Did you hit it with the puck in the head too, or what?
Yeah. I was, I was working part-time in radio and I had to have other jobs to, pay my bills. But I wanted to get into sports. I knew I wanted to do sports. I wanted to do Major League Baseball, to be honest with you, when I first started it. But, the way I got into radio was my local station at home was advertising. They needed somebody part-time. I went in. I did an audition. So the same was true with the hockey team. People say, get your foot in the door. So they had a new owner. He was doing some new things. One was hiring or creating a mascot. So I went and I auditioned for it. And funny story, Dave Mishkin, who is the radio voice of the Tampa Bay Lightning, he was the radio guy in Johnstown at the time. And it was him and the general manager that took me to the mall at lunchtime, put me in the suit, and all they had to do was watch how I interacted with people. And so I did that for 40 minutes, and I got the job. So I was getting paid $25 a night to go to home games and be the mascot. And after like 5 games, the owner came to me and goes, I love it. You're doing great. I'm going to give you $30 a night. Oh, that was awesome. Well, as we went through that season, I continued to try to get a minor league baseball job, and that happened in February. I got a chance to go down to Kinston, North Carolina. It was a Cleveland Indians single A team. So I left and I went down there and I did the season, but the job was over in September. It was a seasonal job. So the owner of the hockey team in Johnstown, said, I want you to come back and be the mascot. And I said, well, I need a job. He said, okay, I'll make you the director of group ticket sales. So you come in and you spend the day selling tickets, calling church groups, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, whatever. And you sell tickets all day, and then you can be the mascot during the games. Well, it was ironically, that's kind of how I got my radio break because Dave had moved on to Hershey at that time. and a new guy had come in. His name's Greg DeVito. And Greg was great. Like from the time I was there, he goes, "Hey, I understand you did minor league baseball. I might have to have you do some commercials for the broadcast." He got paid by the radio station, so he had to do some other things. He had a bunch of high school hockey he had to do. So, he told me, "Hey, if you want to go to these high school games with me, I'll help you learn how to actually broadcast hockey." So I did that, and he'd let me do a couple of periods of play-by-play, and he'd critique me, and he was awesome about that. And then I went back into baseball. I ended up getting offered a full-time job, so I was still going back at times on weekends and doing the mascot thing. But long story short, when Greg went to the American Hockey League a few years later, he went to New Haven, and the Johnstown radio job was open, so I ended up getting the job. I went back, and so as I tell people, when I go and I talk to Rotary clubs and all this stuff, I always say I went from the job where you're not allowed to say a word to the job where all you do is talk. That's what I did in Johnstown. I was a mascot, and then I was a radio guy. And after 2 years there, and I was still doing baseball. I was going to Salem, Virginia, and doing minor league baseball in the summer. So, it'd be kind of 6 months here, 6 months there. I lived 30 minutes out of Johnstown, so it wasn't, a big deal to be doing that, going back and forth. I'd go home and live for the winter and then go do baseball in the summer. But then when I got a chance to go to the American Hockey League, and work for the Crunch, which I didn't think I was ready to do at the time. I thought, here's a baseball guy that loves doing hockey, but I've only got 2 years in the East Coast League. I didn't think that I was ready to go there, but they thought differently, and I'm glad they did. And the station that the hockey games were on there also carried the AAA baseball team, which was affiliated with the Blue Jays at the time. And one of the guys that did the baseball had just left. I mean, the timing couldn't have been more perfect. So that was the start of 10 years where I would do American Hockey League all winter and AAA baseball all summer. Wow. And, that was back before I was married, before I had kids, and doing 220 games a year wasn't such a big deal.
Just for all young broadcasters, I get asked a lot. I know you do. We all do. How do you make it to the National Hockey League? Well, there's a great story. You don't make it just like that. There are lots of growth and hard line and things to work on the way up. I mean, ex-players, it's a little easier, although, we have to pay our dues as well. But certainly for play-by-play, it's a real art. And I always have the utmost respect for play-by-play men. It's a hard job. And to watch both of you climb up is a real testament to you, and as well for young people to hear that story.
Yeah, and it's funny because when they ask, and everybody does, we all have different stories, right? John's story is different than mine, and so there's no one set path. And you're right. The thing that I always tell people, anytime we have groups in, I tell them, look, the first job that you get may not be the job that you want, but if you feel that it can get you to the job that you want, that you got to take it, and you've got to do the best that you can at it. And I'll be honest, like, I liked hockey and I watched hockey, but when I would once I got in it, it really fit me. I love the sport. I love the people. I love the family atmosphere of it. And I'm so glad that it happened for me, because this is really where I feel I belong.
Well, we've known each other now for many years from our time in the American League, and it's always great to catch up with you, Bobby, and just the same as today. And hopefully we can do this again soon. I hope you're doing well. Stay safe. Take care. And just before we go, of course, any recommendations where you might find a great barbecue joint in Syracuse, the best wings in the league, maybe?
Here we go.
This.
You guys know the Dinosaur Barbecue is where you go in Syracuse. The irony of it is I lived there 10 years, and I went to the one in Rochester more than I went. I don't even know if I ever went to the one in Syracuse, but in Rochester, I went all the time. And by the way, if any of your fans, look at that, see? If any of your fans are traveling to New Jersey to watch a game against the Devils, they have one right next to the building in New Jersey now. So you're also
right in Newark, right behind it. Absolutely. The Wango Tango Wings. There they are right there. They are the best wings you'll ever have. So, and I was the same as you. I always ended up in the Rochester one, not necessarily Syracuse.
It was close to the hotel.
It was close to the hotel. It was walking distance. That's right.
That's how when every time people say, what's your favorite city?
Play guys like freebies. I'm wondering if you're trying to get a freebie from the Dino the next time you drag me there. I don't know.
No.
Always say, when they say, what's your favorite city? I always tell them, I go, listen, I'm going to evaluate it based on the hotel and the places to eat around the hotel and how the rink is. There's 3 factors for me pretty much everywhere we go. So sometimes they're surprised on my choices.
You speak the truth.
So am I. Believe me.
You speak the truth. Bobby, great talking to you, man. Take care. Stay safe. This has been a lot of fun, and hopefully we'll do it again sometime soon.
Hey, thanks for the invite, guys. It's great to talk a little hockey and some good stories with you, and enjoy this new venture that you're in right now. You're doing a great job. Thanks.
Great chatting with Bobby Mack all the time. I had to laugh about the story of him being a mascot because I can relate to that. Do you know, Mr. Millen, who holds the distinction of being the final mascot ever for a hockey game at Maple Leaf Gardens?
Don't tell me it was you.
It is me.
Come on.
Yes.
That's something I never knew about my partner.
I know you wouldn't do that. And as soon as Bobby was talking about it.
Unbelievable.
So here's the story. Now, not
Really the biggest
sporting
mascot I've ever seen. I mean, you're huge to begin with.
So not the last sporting event, because the Toronto Rock were the last sporting event at Maple Leaf Gardens, but the last hockey game was an OHL game with the Toronto St. Michael's Majors and the Mississauga Ice Dogs. And at the time, I'd done a little bit of radio work with the Majors, and I was doing some stuff in the OHL, but I knew the person who was doing the marketing for the Majors. And we had worked together on a couple of projects. And so it's coming down to this last game at the Gardens. And Mikey the Dog, with a big shaggy dog, was the Majors mascot. They didn't have anyone to play the mascot for that game. And he said, "Oh, I'm really stuck. I don't have a mascot." I said, "Well, I'll do it. I'll throw the suit on for it." "Really?" So I suited up as Mikey the Dog for a game at Maple Leaf Gardens. And I'll never forget. I felt so terrible. I can't see very well in the suit to begin with. I was having fun. I made some signs, and had a good time with it. But
Were they backwards?
no, they were the right way. Yes, they weren't backwards graphics. So I'm in the suit, and you can only kind of see a little bit through the opening, and I'm having fun with the kids. Well, at one point, a little kid came behind me, and he wanted to give me a high five or a hug, and I didn't see him, and I spun around and whacked him. And you feel terrible. You're a mascot. You can't talk. So inside, I'm like, oh no. And all I'm doing is grabbing the head and like trying to be a, sign language saying, "I'm so sorry." And anyways, that was the one part I felt terrible. He was all right, but that part. But yeah, it was kind of fun. And it turned out to be that was the last hockey game ever played at Maple Leaf Gardens. And I was a mascot. There you go. Mikey the Dog.
Things you don't know about your partner. Anyway, stay
learn.
safe, everybody, and keep it going here. We're getting there.
Absolutely. Stay safe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on From the Booth.